It begins the way all terrible truths do, quietly, almost politely, as if the world itself was reluctant to let anyone know. Imagine this: officers in a rural town, sent on what should have been a routine welfare check, push open a door. What they step into is not a home, not even a room. It is a vault, a chamber where silence itself seems to rot, the kind of place you don't stumble upon, you trespass into. And what they found was not only evidence of a life lived, but a life hidden, layer upon layer of secrets sealed in dust, paper, and whispers. The room seemed alive with memory, yet hollow, as if it had waited for decades for someone, anyone, to finally bear witness. Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit subscribe and tap the bell icon before this story pulls you in too deep, because once you hear what lay inside that room, you may wish you never knew it existed. The first detail that stood out was the air. The officers later described it as heavy, sweet, and metallic, a scent that clung to them long after they left. Stacked against the far wall, hundreds of boxes, meticulously labeled, written in the same delicate, slanted handwriting, dates stretching back to the 1920s. The papers inside didn't speak of ordinary life, but instead of fractured histories, clippings from newspapers, obituaries with names circled, strange photographs of children who never seemed to age, and in the center of the room, as though arranged for a silent audience, sat a single wooden chair, empty, facing nothing but the wall. It is here the story begins to collapse into something much darker, because while evidence rooms are meant to preserve the truth, this space felt designed to bury it. Some of the photographs were pinned together in sequences, almost like film strips showing the slow deterioration of faces over decades. The same eyes, the same smile, the same, but older, cracker, and hollow. The officers who stepped into that room realized they hadn't just found someone's collection, they had found someone's obsession. And the question that lingers even now is, who was being studied? And why did it have to be hidden away where no one was meant to find it? The deeper the officers searched, the stranger the details became. Inside one of the boxes, bound together with brittle string, were letters written in a hand that looked both delicate and fevered. They were unsigned, undated, yet all addressed to the same recipient. You. Each letter spoke in fragments, pleas for forgiveness, warnings about keeping doors locked, references to the watchers in the field. None mentioned names, none offered locations. It was as if the writer spoke to someone who lived only in memory, or worse, in imagination. Among the letters lay small relics, pressed flowers faded to brittle husks, a pair of children's shoes with soles almost worn through, and a collection of tarnished lockets, each containing hair. But it wasn't just human hair. Some strands were long, others coarse, almost animal-like. The pattern of preservation was meticulous, ritualistic. Whoever had arranged these objects had done so with the precision of a curator, yet without any sense of comfort. This was not a shrine of love, but of surveillance. The chair in the center, when examined closely, revealed carvings along its arms, lines upon lines etched so deeply they seemed to scar the wood, marks of counting, hundreds of them, some fresh, some faded. It suggested someone had sat there for years, tallying time in silence. The thought lingers. Did the occupants sit in watch of the secrets stacked around them, Or did they count the days waiting for something, or someone, that never returned? More disturbing still were the photographs pinned to the walls. Unlike the others in the boxes, these were larger, yellowed by time, curling at the edges. Each showed a lone figure, sometimes a woman, sometimes a man, standing in front of the very same door the officers had just entered. Different decades, different clothing, but always the same expression, vacant, as though hollowed out. It was not the subjects who changed, but the years that shifted around them. By the time investigators catalogued the findings, a chilling realization emerged. Whoever assembled this room had not only documented people, but had been documenting generations, tracing bloodlines, isolating features, watching them like specimens beneath glass. The room was less a chamber of memory and more a museum of obsession. And the question that terrified the officers most was simple. Was this person still out there, watching? When archivists were finally called in to study the contents, the layers of secrecy only thickened. Some of the boxes were filled not with personal items, but official documents, birth certificates, death records, even hospital forms, many of them stolen or replicated. The most unsettling detail was how these papers had been altered. Names carefully erased, rewritten in different handwriting, dates scratched over, until the truth beneath them was nearly impossible to recover. Someone had been trying to rewrite history itself, page by page, name by name. One file in particular chilled the researchers. It contained a series of birth certificates, all with the same surname, but spread out over 100 years. Each child born decades apart, yet every document bore a nearly identical photograph of the infant. The features were the same: round face, dark eyes, the faint curl of a smile that never seemed to change. Had someone forged these records? Or had the same child been born again and again across time? Tucked between the papers were journals. Written in a neat but obsessive hand, they recorded daily notes about people in town, descriptions of their habits, the way they walked, the expressions on their faces when they thought no one was watching. Some passages felt harmless, even curious. Others were suffocatingly detailed, as though the writer had shadowed individuals for months. The boy in the orchard has the same eyes as his grandfather. The shape does not change. The pattern continues. That line repeated over and over, with only slight variations. Investigators began to suspect the room's creator was fixated on lineage, on tracking the passage of traits through bloodlines. But this was no scientific pursuit. It was something darker, something desperate, almost as if the writer believed that a secret disease or curse ran through the veins of certain families. The notes did not end with observation. They ended with instructions. Do not let them marry outside. Do not let the line scatter. Keep them here, where we can see them. Imagine the horror of realizing these were not just musings. Many of the families listed in the journals had indeed remained in the same town for generations. And those who left, those who married far from home, were the ones most often found circled in newspaper clippings of obituaries, deaths marked by unusual or sudden means. Was it coincidence? Or was someone ensuring the bloodlines remained, contained? The more they pieced together, the more investigators realized the room was not only a vault of records, but a stage for rituals. In a corner, hidden beneath stacked boxes, they discovered a small wooden chest. Inside lay dozens of objects wrapped in cloth, rusted keys, fragments of broken mirrors, and what appeared to be pieces of bone. Each bundle was marked with a handwritten tag, single words like return, silence, blood, and promise. It was as though each object carried weight beyond its physical form, as if they were meant to bind something invisible. When the bones were examined, they were found to be human. Not one set, but several. Some belonged to adults, others to children. All were scorched, as though burned before being hidden away. The chilling question was not only who these people were, but why their remains had been divided and stored like relics. Every detail pointed less to criminal evidence and more to a kind of private archive, part shrine, part warning. The journals hinted at gatherings, references to the nights when the watchers come, and the room must stay lit until dawn. In one entry, dated decades earlier, the writer describes hearing voices in the walls, whispering the names of children not yet born. They ask me to keep count, the line read, and I do. I always do. These were not the words of a casual observer, but of someone who believed they were tasked with a duty, a burden passed down through time. Stranger still was the discovery of a large faded map pinned flat against the floorboards, concealed beneath a rug. On it, red ink marked specific houses scattered throughout the town. Some were crossed out, others circled. At the bottom of the map was one final inscription. The circle must stay unbroken. For the officers who stood in that room, the implications were unbearable. Was this a family secret, one too twisted to survive the daylight? Or was it larger, a town-wide silence, a pact no one dared speak aloud? The thought that every smiling face on the streets outside might be tied to this secret made the air heavier, the silence louder. What began as a welfare check had become the unsealing of a history that should have remained buried. As investigators traced the documents and maps back through town records, they stumbled upon something even more unnerving. Many of the names written in the journals were of people who had officially disappeared. Not runaways, not confirmed dead, just vanished. Their homes abandoned, their belongings left untouched, as if they had been erased mid-step. In local archives, mentions of these families were scant. Whole branches of lineages seemed to have been cut away, pruned from the town's history. One surviving resident, an elderly woman who had lived there her entire life, was asked about the names. Her face tightened, her eyes narrowing in silence. Then, in a voice so thin it nearly broke, she said only, "We were told not to look for them." After that, she refused to speak again. The journals described these vanishings with cold detachment. One entry read, "The mother tried to leave with the boy. He carried the eyes so he could not go. The watchers followed. She understood in the end." Another read simply, "Removed the house. No trace remains. The circle stays unbroken." Each line suggested not random misfortune, but calculated removals, generational pruning to keep certain bloodlines intact. Photographs reinforced this horror. Images of school classes where entire rows of children had been cut from the print, their silhouettes left empty. Wedding photos where the bride's face was scraped away with a blade, leaving only the groom intact. Every alteration was deliberate. Every erasure was permanent. The most disturbing photograph found in the room showed a family gathered on the steps of a farmhouse. The faces of the adults were blurred by time, but the child in the center was crystal clear, untouched by decay. He was staring forward with those same hollow eyes that had appeared across decades of images. On the back of the photo, scrawled in faded ink, were the words, "He must remain." By this point, the investigators began to wonder if they had uncovered not just a collector's obsession, but a coordinated effort, one that stretched across decades, maybe centuries. The town wasn't silent by accident. It was silent because it had been trained to be, and those who asked too many questions became names in the journals. The more investigators compared the journals with the town archives, the more a pattern emerged, one that felt less like random obsession and more like orchestration. Every 20 to 30 years, a cluster of disappearances would occur, always involving the same handful of families. Sometimes it was a child, sometimes an entire household, but without fail, their absence would be quietly erased, as though the community had agreed to forget. Birth records would vanish, property deeds were reassigned, graves appeared without bodies beneath them. In one of the final boxes, the officers found something that should never have existed. A series of photographs, decades apart, but featuring the same figure, always at the edge of the frame, always half-shadowed, sometimes wearing a wide-brimmed hat, sometimes in plain clothes, but always the same posture, the same unnerving stillness. Comparing the images, the truth struck hard. This figure had not aged, not once, not in nearly a century. Pinned beside these photographs was a sheet of paper, its words trembling with desperation. "He does not change. He waits for them. He waits for us." The handwriting was different from the neat entries in the journals, shakier, more frantic. It suggested there was more than one keeper of the room, as though the responsibility had been handed down, generation after generation. Each had documented the same presence, the same intruder who somehow lingered in their town's bloodlines. The officers began to fear they had uncovered evidence not of one individual's madness, but of a legacy of madness. A family duty passed like an heirloom, compelling each keeper to record, to preserve, to erase. But for what? Some believed it was superstition, an old world curse dragged into modern life. Others whispered it was a pact, a bargain struck long ago to keep something at bay. And then there was the most ting possibility that the figure in the photographs was no intruder at all, but the very center of the circle, a being the town had bound itself to, willingly or unwillingly, generation after generation. Perhaps the room wasn't a collection at all, but an altar. The question that remained, unspoken but chilling, was simple. If the circle had remained unbroken for over a century, who was keeping it intact now? In the final days of their investigation, the officers sealed the room. Officially, it became nothing more than an evidence locker, a case filed under unsolved, gathering dust in the archives. But those who had stood inside never forgot the weight of the air, or the way the photographs seemed to watch them even after the door was closed. Some resigned quietly, unable to bear the thought of going back. Others left town altogether. Rumors spread, as they always do. Neighbors whispered that strange figures were seen again in the fields at dusk, silhouettes standing too still, too long. One farmer swore he saw a man in a wide-brimmed hat watching from the tree line, though when he looked again, the man was gone. A schoolteacher claimed old records from her classroom had vanished overnight. Every photograph of a particular child torn neatly from the yearbooks. The town, it seemed, had decided to continue the silence, to protect the circle. What haunts most is not what was found, but what was missing. All boxes were empty, as though someone had removed their contents just before the police arrived. Were they warned? Or was the keeper still alive, still continuing the work elsewhere? If the responsibility had truly passed through generations, then somewhere, perhaps in another basement, another locked room, a new archive was already being built. The deeper truth may never surface. The town does not speak, the families remain, and the circle, if it still holds, is maintained by silence more than by ritual. Some historians who later examined the fragments suggested the room was less about worship and more about containment, as if whatever haunted those bloodlines was not being celebrated, but imprisoned. Yet imprisonment is fragile. Locks break, secrets leak, and so the story ends, not with clarity, but with a wound, a scar in the history of a place that prefers forgetting to remembering, a door closed, but never locked, and should it open again, one wonders what will step out, a truth long denied, or something that has been waiting patiently in the dark, unchanging, unyielding, watching, always watching.